So welcome everyone. Welcome to our College Fair Live pre-fair sessions and workshops. I'm delighted to announce that we'll have 4 fairs lined up this year. And this one will be followed by fairs in October, November, and December. Our program schedule is typically divided in 2 parts. So there are webinars and workshops on the fair day from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. And then the college fair actually begins at 6:30 p.m. and ends at 9:30 p.m. on each of the fair days. So basically at the fair, you can meet college reps at their tables and sort of have conversations. Another really big feature of our fairs is to promote student-led initiatives. So we have several student-led clubs which you can sort of interact with and maybe partner with. So as a student, make the best of it. I hope you enjoy and learn from today's session. I'm so delighted to host this with Adam Sapp from Pomona College, Kim Lord from Vassar College, and Terrence Smith from Rice University. 3 of my very favorite and very diverse sort of campuses and locations in the United States. So take it over from here, Adam.
Thank you so much, Arjun. I am very, very pleased to be here this morning with my colleagues. We are going to do just some very, some very brief introductions, and then we're going to move on to an agenda, and I'll walk us through our session before we get started. So my name is Adam Sapp. I'm Assistant Vice President and Director of Admission at Pomona College.
Hi, hello, y'all. My name is Kim Lord, and I am Associate Director of Admission at Vassar College.
Hi, everyone. I'm Terrence Smith, Deputy Director of Admission at Rice University.
And we are here today to talk about highly selective admissions in a test optional world. We are going to walk through a couple of different pieces of the application a little bit in depth. We're going to talk through our reading process and how we go through the reading process, some of the things that we value, some of the things that we believe. And then we're also going to discuss how we prioritize information. So an application is made up of many different components, and Taryn's going to walk us through how we think about weighting those components and what we do in the process as we're sort of literally flipping through the virtual file. How are we thinking about the information that both you submit and your school and your teachers submit? Kim is going to give us a few examples of different parts of the application and sort of how we might present or how you might present the information really well so that you come across very clearly and that you have your story told in the best way possible. Then we're going to move on to some tips. We each have a moment that we're going to talk through some things that we think are really important to highlight and to consider. And then we want to get to your questions and discuss a little bit about some of the things that are on your mind. Maybe they are questions you came in this morning that you had before you got here and you want to ask it. That's great. Maybe we sort of presented something that made you say, that's kind of interesting, but I wonder about this. Please feel free to ask that kind of a question too. We want to make sure that it's a robust discussion as you have time to engage with us today. We are not going to do sort of deep overviews on our institutions. We all have really robust, engaging virtual programs available that specifically target outreach international students. So we know that you have specific needs and interests, and we have programming that addresses that on our website. So please check out our websites for that. But we will provide our contact information at the end if you have any questions. We are all on the international committees in our respective offices, so we do know a lot about international admissions, and we'll talk a little bit about that and our India expertise as well as we move through the mornings or our time with you. All right, so we'll move on to the next slide, and I'll take it away by talking a little bit about our reading process. So, describing the way in which we read, I think, is best described by thinking about this in a series of value statements. So Vassar, Rice, and Pomona, and many of our highly selective peers really approach reading with what we would call an institutional lens. So we are building communities that our institution values. And so as a consequence, a lot of institutions have value statements or mission statements, or they have a collection of values that they prioritize. And all of these sort of trickle down into the ways in which admissions offices think about recruiting and reading. So for example, we believe in interdisciplinary learning and that diverse voices add real value. Those are things I think I know that all three of us can get behind. We drive really hard to make sure every year we have diverse communities on our campus. Diversity, access, inclusion, and belonging are critical to our sort of definition of excellence when we think about community and academic and social excellence. And we also want the ability to foster interdisciplinary learning. And there's no better way to do that than to have a diverse collection of people on campus. That's lived experiences, that might be first languages, backgrounds, where you live, what kind of school you go to, what kind of life experiences you have, all of those things that sort of make you, you. And we really think a lot about that. And a little bit, just to put a fine point on it, a little bit deeper in, I would say we also all believe that global community works best. All three of us have been doing international recruitment for a long time. We've been around the world. We've seen different countries and places and people and cultures. And we know that our communities, our university and college communities are made better when the world is on them. This has never been more true than this year. We have just spent the last 18 months living in virtual community with our students and faculty and friends. And all three of us now have on-campus communities that we're in the process of welcoming back. And we are so excited about it. And I personally just gave the welcome to Pomona's international students on Sunday, and I was beaming with joy to see so many people from around the world. It just re-energized me to know that we are a global community. And like Rice and Vassar really do a lot to foster and support the students who come to our campuses from around the world. So that's key as we think about reading as well. We also are places that are highly residential. So of course we think that you should learn beyond the major and that you should learn in small classes and that not all learning occurs in class, right? And so we have majors and we have academic areas of focus, but all three of us have designed our majors so that students do a major and other things so that we know you can take classes across many academic disciplines. Of those going to be in small classes, and so you are going to have the opportunity to learn in intimate environments. So of course, when we're reading applications, we're thinking about who are you in the classroom and who are you outside of the classroom, because we believe that not all learning occurs inside a classroom. So you are leaders outside of a class and you are scholars inside of a classroom. And that is the sort of set of assumptions that we make when we're looking at applications, evaluating applications, reading, discussing applications. And then finally, to wrap up this section, I would say all of this work occurs in what we call committees. And so when we are reading applications, and this is sort of part of the case study, right? We're trying to lift the curtain a little bit to let you know how this works. We all read in committees and we make decisions in committees. And so these beliefs and these assumptions essentially get worked into conversations that we all have in committees as we discuss and debate and deliberate and build consensus around who we would like to select to be admitted into the class. All right, so with that, we'll flip the slide and we'll learn a little bit more from Taryn.
Great, thank you, Adam. And so hello again, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about application components, what we're looking at, and why they're all important. So Pomona, Vassar, Rice, we all do what are called holistic review. We're looking at each piece of the application that you submit to make the decision. And we're not necessarily weighing one more than another. However, they all play an important role when making that decision in those committees that Adam was just talking about. So first, let's discuss academic performance. So your transcripts, your mark sheets, your grade trends, and external exams. How you perform in the classroom, or how you have performed in the classroom and in examinations, is going to be a good indicator of how you might perform in our classrooms. And ultimately, we're looking for students who are going to succeed in our classrooms. We want to set you up for success. And so we are going to take a look at your curriculum from 9th grade and beyond. We'll take a look at the classes that you took, understanding that the classes that you took will be very different than another school down the road or in a different country or around the world. Adam hinted at this a little bit in the beginning, that we have all been doing this work for many years. We understand the very different curricular offerings, not just within India, but again, around the world. And we don't expect that your curriculum is going to fit into a mold like in the United States. So for example, if AP exams are not offered at your school, we're not expecting that you're going to take them. And so what you need to do is take what is offered to you and perform well in it. And so again, we'll take a look at all of those grades, whether they're mark sheets, exam results, as well as predicted exam results, to help us determine, do you have that ability to succeed within your classroom? Next, teacher and counselor recommendations. Now, these recommendations are a way to tell us more about you without hearing directly from you. We get to hear from somebody else. Now, we understand that in many schools, there might not be a traditional counselor. Again, knowing that schools and settings vary greatly around the world. If you're a principal or somebody else serves in the counselor section, then that's completely fine as well. But again, teacher and counselor recommendations are telling us about you from a different lens. So typically the counselor, or maybe that principal who's writing on your behalf, is telling us a little bit more about you, maybe in a broader sense, maybe more within the entire school. Now, certainly they'll know about the classes that you've taken and your achievements, but they might be sharing some more broad information with us. Whereas your teachers, those are going to be, those letters will give us much more detail about how you perform in the classroom. How do you interact with your fellow peers? How do you interact with that particular teacher? Do you work independently? Do you work in groups? What type of projects have you worked on? What are your academic interests? And is that teacher related to the interest? So perhaps on your application, you tell the school that you're interested in studying biology. Maybe do you have a biology teacher then who's telling us about your performance in the classroom? And similarly, if you're interested in, an engineering field, thinking about math and science, humanities, social sciences, and teachers related to those. So be thoughtful when you're selecting your teachers as well, because it is nice to have somebody who can talk about your talents and your abilities in the area that you might be interested in studying. And we're all going to give a little bit of a tip towards the end of this. But one thing I want to offer, and so this might bleed into one of my colleagues' tips, but just make sure you give your recommenders time to write their letters of recommendation, because the last thing you want to do is have them rushing through to write that letter. You want them to have time to be thoughtful. So be thoughtful in who you're selecting, and then be thoughtful about the timing of it, because we really will take a deep look at what they're writing. So next, leadership and extracurricular activities. I will say there is no one leadership experience or one extracurricular activity that is going to get you admitted to a university. We're looking for students who have diverse interests. Whether you participated in research, that would be great, but not necessary. Maybe you did activities like athletics, theater, debate, Model UN. Maybe you have family responsibilities that take up a lot of your time. And Kim's going to go into a great case study of how to explain all of your activities, or how to best explain your activities in the application. But whatever you do with that extra time, with your extra time outside of the classroom, matters to us, because that's going to give us an idea of not only what you're interested in and engaged in now, but what you might get involved in at our university as well. How might you contribute to our community? Or maybe what might you learn? What are you interested in trying for the first time? And so whether you're involved in these activities, maybe you have some leadership in those activities as well. Maybe you held an officer position, such as a president, a vice president, a secretary. And so leadership is also great to see, because again, we're going to want to see how that might translate to our campuses. Of course, the essays and writing components are so incredibly important. And again, Kim will talk a little bit more about this in her section, but really, how are you answering the prompts? So the essays, most of the time you're getting to select, depending on which application platform you use, you get to select the essay prompt that you're going to write. And so be thoughtful in selecting that essay. Take some time. Don't just submit one draft and have that be the final draft. Give it to maybe some teachers or some peers of yours, some of your fellow students, to get some feedback, because this is really going to be one last great time where you can wrap up a lot of the information in the application and really have a nice impact one last time in the application. And always be sure, this might sound silly, to make sure you're answering the question. We're going to take a close look at that prompt that you did select. And then again, how did you reply to it? Now, of course, we all have different optional materials. And the first one we'll talk about is standardized testing. This is about your choice. Whether you want to submit those tests is completely up to you. But again, similarly, going back to the mark sheets and the exam results, if you do choose to submit the standardized testing, we're going to take a look at that again to see if that testing is showing us that you have the ability to succeed within our campus community. But again, I can't emphasize enough how optional it truly is. It is really your choice. And then, of course, some other optional information: interviews, what else? Supplemental materials, different questions different universities might ask. When we say something is optional, again, similar to testing, we truly mean optional. You're not going to be penalized if you don't submit it. It's just a great way to add to your application so we can get to know you even more. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to choose if you submit this particular information. Keeping in mind, there are some schools where a supplement is required. So sometimes that supplement is optional, sometimes it's required. So you just want to keep an eye out for that. But all of this information, as I began with, is looked at together. You can see how we're looking for that proof of your ability to succeed, to how you'll contribute to our community, to what your teachers and other professionals at your school are telling us about you. We're looking at all of this together to have those deep conversations during our committees when we're making our decisions. And so with that, I will turn it over to Kim to give us an even deeper look into how we look at some of this information.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Taryn. So what I'm going to do now is really a little bit more of a deep dive into two parts of the application. First is going to be the activities section, or the resume, and then the second is going to be talking about supplemental essays. Whenever I work with students, I always remind them that every open answer box on the application, so every piece of writing, is an opportunity for them to show a different piece of themselves. So I want to go through a couple of examples in a couple of different ways for that matter, just to really showcase how students can be able to really explain their activities, explain their supplemental essays for that matter, and what is going to really help translate for the reader as we are going through the review process. So just to start with the activity list, I want to give you a kind of a big picture. What are some of the things overall that we are looking for when we do approach this piece of the application? So first and foremost is going to be intentionality. We want to see what is this activity that you're involved in and why? Where is that connection? Is this something that is related to an academic or a discipline interest that you might have? Is there an opportunity for you to have engaged with the community in a robust and meaningful way through this activity? Or perhaps something that this is passion or cause specific for you. And so it's something that you're particularly interested in that you've been able to really do a deep dive in through that activity. Additionally, also, we might be looking for consistency. So we do want to see that you've been able to partake in an activity for a couple of years. And most importantly, with the consistency, along with that comes skill development. So how have you been able to showcase growth within that activity? Whether it's an instrument that you might be playing that you have devoted a lot of time to, or perhaps a school club that you've been able to develop into a more meaningful, robust role over your few years that you've been involved. Also, too, along with that comes accomplishment. And this isn't going to be the case, of course, across all of your activities. But again, we do want to see that there has been sort of a point of excellence that you've been able to achieve through a lot of these things that you have been involved in. And along with that, too, can come leadership. And so it is great for students who are able to develop over time into leadership positions. Leadership is a little bit of a buzzword and can also be a little bit of a misleading word, though, because there are lots of ways to showcase leadership. This doesn't have to be an overt leadership position that you might have within a particular club. We have lots of students who lead from behind, who are really able to help develop processes or really work closely with their peers and collaborate. And those can be really vital things that showcase leadership as well. So those are the kinds of the words that I want you to think about as we're approaching the activity list. And again, from a highly selective context, what we're looking for. A lot of students, of course, have concerns about what this means during the pandemic, just because all of sort of the traditional activities that most students have been involved in are no more or are looking remarkably different right now. So just to add a couple of additional words that we sort of are thinking about now, particularly in the year of the pandemic, is we're also looking for creativity or ingenuity. And so really kind of thinking about how have you been able to utilize the resources that you have available to you during this pandemic time to be able to make use of your free time that you might have outside the classroom. So I know Taryn already alluded to this too, but we see a lot of students who have taken on additional family responsibilities. And that's important. That's, again, a great way to show leadership. It's a great way to show that you have responsibility, that you are prepared for ownership for that matter. And so that's something that's really important as well. Or perhaps this means, again, kind of from the creativity side, that you have found ways to translate a lot of things that you've been involved in into a virtual context, or perhaps you've been able to spearhead some activity within that context as well. So those things are all sort of in this new space, things that we are anticipating, and also things that we find exciting to really be able to dig into what you've been able to do during this particular time. So I'm going to give you a quick example, 3 examples. So we're going to pretend that this is sort of 3 different students, all of them who have been involved in the same activity. So all of them are involved in Model UN. And for those of you who might not know Model UN, this is a conference-style program that allows students to come and partake in a mock assembly of the United Nations. So students are able to represent, that's what I'm looking for, various countries around the world and be able to interface with other countries in terms of putting forward motions that might be in their best interest, and really sort of working together on lots of different causes as the actual United Nations might be able to do. So I'm going to present this in 2 ways. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about these 3 students in terms of good, better, and best in what they have actually accomplished. And then I'm going to provide some different context for these 3 students. And so we can talk about how these might translate in terms of a holistic review as we're looking at the actual whole application from a highly selective standpoint. So here's our student 1. This student has been involved in Model UN. So we can see over their 4 years of secondary education, they have been a member of Model UN, and they do share with us that they have both prepared for and participated in Model UN conferences, roughly 2 hours a week for 12 weeks a year. So right off the bat, this is pretty standard, particularly within the context of our application pools, a student who is just involved sort of at the basic level in this particular club. Now, if we were going to compare this student apples to apples with our next student, we will see that their peer here has been involved in Model UN, but they were a founding member of the club at their school, and they have also risen to a lower level leadership position as their undersecretary in their last year of secondary school here. And so they then explained to us further that they were a founding member of the club. They also helped to grow it to 40 members. They gave us context for a number of conferences that they've attended annually, so they were able to go to 4 separate conferences, and then elected specifically to a leadership position for communications for their school club. So, like we were saying, apples to apples, suddenly this kid seems a little bit more compelling in the fact that they were able to both be on the ground in really founding this particular activity within the school, and then being able to grow over 4 years into a leadership position. So apples to apples, now we have student number 3. This student co-founded, so not just was a founding member, but really helped to get this off the ground for their school in their 10th grade year. Next year took on a lower level leadership position as undersecretary, and then in their 12th grade year rose to the top leadership position within the club and their school. And so they gave us this context also where they grew it to 40 members. They created a first virtual conference in the region, which had a huge number of attendees. So again, sort of that creativity and ingenuity within the pandemic context. And then of course, as I said, they were elected to the top position, and more importantly, gave us a connection point here of saying that they were also able to work with other schools within their areas. So like I said, if you were to take these students right off the bat, we have sort of a good, better, and best in terms of their particular involvement that they have with Model UN. But as my colleagues have already explained, we're not really looking at activities within a vacuum here. And so let's go back and think about these students if we do provide just a little bit more context. So student number 1, what if I told you that their other activities are all science related? So this is a student who has engaged really fully in biology research and has found an opportunity to work with a professor in a particular lab and really has dug deeply into that and has explained to us in the application that that is what they want to pursue in high school. So now suddenly taking this into context, okay, cool, the student's a member of Model UN. They have done this as a way to push themselves outside of their particular area of interest. So that's something that we would then take within context and not necessarily be looking for some of those leadership positions, some of that level of accomplishment or achievement within this particular activity. Likewise too, if I had this student and in their application, they had explained to us that they identify as an introvert. And so they are somebody for whom public speaking has always been a huge fear for them. And they joined Model UN as a way for them to really develop some of those skills. And now suddenly, again, taking this within a context, we have seen that the student has not only helped found this club, but also risen to a leadership position with them as a way of personal growth. And that's, again, something that's really important for us as we're considering students as part of our community, that this is somebody who is able to take that initiative, as somebody who's really been willing to push themselves in ways that are not academically related to really help them in terms of their own development. And so this suddenly has a compelling story for this student, even if they don't have that top level of leadership or accomplishment. And then, of course, now we have this student who hopefully is going to tell us that they are highly interested in international relations and political science. And guess what? They have the accolades here, as we can see, particularly within this activity, to really back that up as that connection to that academic discipline, and certainly that development of leadership, showing that consistency over 4 years, all those things that are really going to make sense within the broader scope of the rest of that application. So I share this again because this is not meant to be prescriptive, obviously. Each student is going to present themselves differently, but it's most important for us that we are really looking at everything. And so none of this is really being considered within a vacuum. And that's really what I want you to remember as you are presenting yourself, particularly within the application. Now, a couple of notes here, and that these students were all pretty basic in how they explained their activities to us. On both the common application and the coalition application, which all of our institutions accept, regardless of which one you choose to submit for us, you are going to be very limited in the number of characters that you are able to use when describing any of your activities. And so I say this because I encourage you to really use that space wisely. Let's go back to our friend number 1 here, who explained to us that they were a member of Model UN and gave us a super basic explanation of, okay, they prepared and participated. They actually left some characters on the table here. And so there was an opportunity for them to give us just a little bit more color commentary here about what does it mean for preparation? What kind of readings were they doing? What kind of engagements were they doing in small groups when discussing the kinds of things that they might want to be presenting when they actually go to the conference? How many conferences did they participate in? Were they local? Were they international? There's a lot of detail here that would actually really help us understand kind of the level of this commitment. And so that's something I really encourage you to think about. How can you sort of quantify and qualify? Yes, within a very limited number of characters, but any kind of that additional detail is really helpful for us in really understanding kind of what that profile means for you. I say this on the flip side, and I did not give an example of this, but we do often see a lot of students who like to maximize those character counts in every way possible by using lots of shorthand and abbreviations. And so I say that because be judicious about that space. And yes, we do want to understand kind of the context of your activity, but on the flip side, don't do so much shorthand that you're confusing the reader. And we are reading this within a very limited amount of time, so we often don't have sort of the mental energy to be able to parse out what some of those pieces might mean. And so just be really conscious about finding that good line of giving us detail, but also not confusing us. One of the things that you do have as part of the application, though, and I will share this in a minute as part of my little tip too, is that you do have both an additional information space. And then we are also, I believe all 3 of our institutions at least, will take a supplemental resume as well. And so if there is something that does require just a little bit more information, those are certainly places that you can use to be able to share out that doesn't necessarily fit into the short character counts that you're going to have in the activities section. And I say that because let's take our friend number 3 here. So for example, if this student had a number of awards, so perhaps they got a Best Speaker Award, or perhaps they were involved in a number of conferences, more than they could possibly fit within this 150 characters that they have. And so they might want to explain that out. And that's something that might be useful for us to know, particularly if it's something that's really pertinent for them and as something that they've really developed and spent a lot of their time and energy in over the course of their secondary school education. Okay, so let's quickly switch to talking about supplemental essays. And supplemental essays here are the institution-specific questions that you're going to find on either the common application or the coalition application. I'm going to talk specifically from the standpoint of those that are related to either sort of a why us context here or a how you can contribute to our community. And so these are questions that both Vassar and Rice, for example, have sort of a why Vassar, why Rice question, and both Rice and also Pomona have a what will you contribute to our community question. So these are very common ones that you certainly find across our institutions, but you're likely going to find in a lot of highly selective contexts as well. And so let's talk about what those mean, what those look like, and again, a couple of sort of tips and examples about how you can utilize these well. What we're really looking for from either sort of a why question or a community question is really that you have an understanding of what our residential, highly academic intellectual institutions look like and really what that means for you. And so how you're going to be able to fit within that context of that really robust community that we have developed. So we like to be able to see that. We want to see that strong connection, but also most importantly, we really want to see that these answers are about you. One of the sort of pitfalls I often see for students who are answering these types of questions is that they really spend more time describing the institution itself rather than, again, sort of focusing that inward on them. And so I end up learning more about my own institution than I have necessarily about the student and how they are reflecting on themselves as a potential member of our community. So just to give you a quick example of that, these are actual application pieces from last year that I pulled out with permission of the students. But we had one student who said, reflecting on our sustainability and climate, they said, I'm enthusiastic about Vassar's commitment to sustainability with its 2020 climate action plan, which includes a promise of reducing combustion-based heating by 40%, waste by 25%, and becoming carbon neutral by 2030. And on and on. Point of this is, yeah, great, this is all about Vassar, but I actually ended up learning nothing about the student from this particular response. And so I really would have loved to see, what did this mean for them? Why are they interested in sustainability? Was this an academic interest? Is this a personal passion for them? How do they see themselves as being part of this in terms of the resources, in terms of the academic programs, in terms of the extracurricular offerings that we might have on campus? So this was, again, sort of that missed opportunity within the supplemental essay for them to really be able to showcase themselves. On another hand, this was someone who did this better. And so this is a student who's particularly interested in astronomy. And so they shared with us that my fascination with the night sky started with the Big Dipper when I was a child and led to my IB extended essay research this year. And so Vassar, its programs, its research, its resources, opportunities in astronomy have all strengthened her desire to study the heavens. At Vassar, they would take observational astronomy and be able to spend their evenings in the class of 1951 observatory, perfectly fulfilling their desire to study the cosmos. And so this one was the one that was able to make that connection. So was able to take that why Vassar question that we have, that early understanding of our community, and showcase what we have within the school, and how, again, is that really connecting to what their interests are and how they could see themselves fitting. So again, this is just one of those pieces too, and I mentioned this before, as every piece of writing on the application is that opportunity for you to showcase something new about yourself in the holistic context as academic and social communities. We are really being intentional about how we admit and how we develop that class. And so strongly encourage you just to make sure that that focus always stays on you, and you're really kind of considering how you're able to show your authentic self within all those pieces of the application. Okay, so that was our case studies. And before we switch this over to Q&A, we do have just a couple of pearls of wisdom that we do want to share with you. And I'm at the top, so I will get started. So one of my pieces of advice that I have on the application process itself, and this might have come through in some of the things that I said already, is to really be thoughtful about what optional materials are being accepted by our institutions. And I share this because, particularly for international students who we don't necessarily have an opportunity to greet and welcome on campus, or we may not have an opportunity to connect with in more robust ways. For example, we do accept interviews, and we do offer international students interviews as well. And so this can be a great chance. It's optional, of course, but for us just to add a little bit more color and understand your personality better, and how you might really fit within our community. Likewise, too, one of our optional materials is that we do take art, music, or dance supplements. They are shared out with our faculty, who do offer an assessment of those for us, but they actually only share positive feedback with us as part of the application process. And so for students who have really devoted a lot of time and energy in those particular areas, that can again be one of those pieces that actually really adds some additional just information for us, and some really additional highlights for that matter that we're able to consider as part of that application review. So these are all about student choice, as Taryn said before, but it is something that can just add something that's a little bit unique about you within the application. So I do encourage you to think thoughtfully about those, and if there might be additional things that you might want to share with us. And I will pass this over to Adam now.
Thanks, Kim. Great tip. My tip is that I really think, and I've changed my tips over the years. I used to have different tips, and I sort of changed them during COVID because I think we are often very me-centered, And I think during this time, I hope we've all been able to take a step back from that and be a little more we-centered, a little more us-centered. And so I just want to sort of remind you, you're not doing this alone. You need teacher support, you need counselor support, you need parent support. So maybe you need your brothers and sisters to help support you as well. So just be kind to those around you. Give your teachers a little bit of time whenever you ask them for recommendations. Make sure that you are treating people with respect as you're moving through the process. Things can get really crazy, right? Things can get really stressful. You can be feeling like you're under pressure and you feel like you have some anxiety. Just remember to sort of take a deep breath and look at those around you and say, okay, we're all in this together. So let's be kind as we move forward. Everybody is trying hard to support you in your journey. Everybody wants you to succeed. So treating them with respect as we move through the process is super helpful. And I think just worth reminding everyone about every once in a while. Taryn?
Thanks, Adam. My piece of advice is to stay organized, make lists. Maybe make an Excel sheet or a Google sheet, whatever it is that's going to help you stay organized, because every institution does things differently. We all have different required materials and optional materials. We all have different deadlines. I see some of the questions coming in about deadlines, and all of our deadlines are going to be different. And so make sure you're keeping lists in whatever way works best for you. Keep all of that information in an organized way so you have a quick reference point. And as you're going through information, if you're looking at our website and digging into the details and something is unclear or you can't find something, ask us, reach out to us. All of our offices and all of our staff members are eager to talk with you and make sure that you have the clarity that you need so that you can stay organized. So don't be afraid to reach out to our offices with any questions. We're all happy to make this process as clear as possible for everybody.
All right, so with that, we're going to move into our last section of today's presentation, which is the Q&A. I've been collecting all your questions in the chat, so thank you very much. I threw them onto an Excel and I've sort of organized them. A few of them have been upvoted because a few people ask a different version of that question, so I'll respect that and we'll get to those early on. But I want to start with one of the questions that I think was actually pretty provocative. One of the things that I hadn't really thought about, but I liked the way that the person who asked the question framed this. And so Kim and Taryn, I'll throw it to you. Have you seen a shift? This is in regard to extracurriculars. Have you seen a shift in extracurricular activities or profiles of applicants? And I'll sort of expand a little bit and say, how are we thinking differently in admissions committee about what leadership and extracurricular activities might look like, given some of what we know in many parts of the world has been perhaps more student isolation or online learning or things like that? Any thoughts?
Sure, I'll jump in first, and then Taryn, you can tag team afterwards as well too. And I know I touched on this briefly when talking about the activities list, and I think all of us can say that we've seen a huge shift over this past admission cycle as to what activities have looked like during this time. And so I mentioned the idea of leadership as one of the things that we're looking for, and did try to give a couple of examples where absolutely, things like taking on family responsibilities is a form of leadership. Being able to, if you're in your room and you're taking on additional reading, for example, because you're not able to have sort of the extracurricular offerings that you might have had at school, or you might be doing some more self-learning for that matter. And so being able to explain how you spent that free time, those are ways to show initiative. Those are ways to show sort of leadership within your own life as well. And so that idea of leadership is not sort of singular, I think is kind of the point. And so we're really looking for those development of intangible skills, and that can come through in so many different forms as well. So really the point is the activities list, we want to know how you spent that free time. And so just to be really open and honest with us about that. So it is coming down to spending time with your family. It is coming down to solitary activities that you're having to do on your own. These are things that are all important for us to know. And as I've said too, and my colleagues have reiterated this as well, we're taking all of that within a holistic context. And so that's certainly something that we'll be really considering. What has your school, what has your home life looked like, and how that might have impacted what you've been able to do.
And I'll just add on to that, from the academic standpoint, as Kim was saying, your school context, we understand that, perhaps the way that you were learning changed. So maybe you moved to a virtual platform, maybe you moved to a hybrid platform. We know that grading styles might have changed. We know that certain exams weren't available, and we understand that. And also keep in mind that this has impacted students from around the world. It's not just students within India or South Asia or Europe. Every student around the world has been impacted by this. So we know that things like activities and academics might not be what they used to be. And that's going to be true for a couple of years, because it's not just something that's impacting, this most recent class that's starting with us, or the next one that's coming. There are millions of students around the world who, from grade 9, this is how they started their high school experience, their secondary school experience. And so we know it's going to be something that's going to impact the way that we're looking at activities and things like that for many years.
Great. So this question might actually highlight some differences amongst and between us. So how does the admissions process work for each major? For example, if I'm applying to computer science or to business school, will I be evaluated differently with students who are from other majors? I can start at Pomona, and I think Vassar might be similar, but we admit to the college regardless of the major. And so at Pomona, we have a process where we don't actually admit you to any school, because there are no schools within the college. Pomona is one unit, and you declare your major at the end of sophomore year. So whether you apply as a computer science major, or our word for business would be economics. And so we might say economics major, math major, psychology major, whatever it is. You're then going to have 2 years to decide if you actually want to major in that. And you're not placed within a school inside of Pomona. There's just sort of one community that you're a part of. And I think Vassar works very similarly, right, Kim?
Yeah, Vassar is absolutely very similar to Pomona. And I will dig just a little bit deeper too and say that our students, while we do ask you to indicate potential academic areas of interest on the application, we're not actually reviewing by major either. And so you're admitted, of course, to the college, but we're also not limiting, for example, the number of economics or computer science majors that we would have on campus. We're really looking at you again within sort of the context of your own application.
Yeah, that's great. Let me add one caveat before I have Taryn reply, which is at Pomona, that is true with the exception that if you apply to STEM, you must have calculus. So we do have some slightly different expectations for curriculum based on major, even though we're not admitting you to a specific major.
And Rice is just a hair different. We do have schools of study. So within Rice University, we have 7 undergraduate schools of study. However, similar to Vassar and Pomona, you're not declaring a major, you're not admitted into a major until the end of your second year. So again, on the application, you'll tell us what you're interested in, because that gives us the lens as to how to evaluate you, as well as Adam mentioned, are there certain classes that you should already be pursuing if you're interested in particular fields. And then only one other caveat to that for Rice is if you're coming into the Shepherd School of Music or the School of Architecture, those are programs that you do have to come directly into as a first year student. So you are admitted directly to those programs. But I think this is the perfect example of, staying organized, make lists, what school does things which way. because even within just the three of us, we have maybe some little differentiations.
Great. So this is an interesting question. I definitely have a take on this, but I would love to know what you two think. Do you have to have physical proof that you participated in an extracurricular activity? Like if you play badminton or football or swimming, how would you know if I do? And I'm happy to start. So I feel like as someone who has talked to counselors about this, there are two things that I would say we assume is happening. One is that you're being honest and that you're telling us the things you do because you are communicating honestly about who you are, not just as a high school student, but who you would like to be as a college or university student. So automatically there is a trust contract between the institution and the student that we hope is the beginning of a trust relationship that we would have with you if we admit you and you enroll and you become a student on our campus. And that academic communities are founded many times, they are explicitly founded as communities of trust and honor where that which someone says is true. And so the beginning of your relationship with that institution as an applicant should be founded on that same principle of trust and honesty. The second thing I would say is that if you put admissions offices in the position where we have to move from trust to trust and verify, if there's a doubt of something in the application where we have to move to verification, and that information is proven to be false, and we can confirm that you lied in your application. We all have admissions offers that come with a clause that essentially says that we do reserve the right to review our decisions should there be any kind of false information or a significant decline in grades post-admission. These are often sort of academic or honors clauses that are written into offers of admission. Very rarely are they triggered, but in the case of false information or lying to an admissions committee, I don't know very many deans that would be very happy about that. And I think that there's probably students who would be considered for review and that their offer would be yanked or their offer would essentially be rescinded if it was found out that you had provided false information. So those are, as someone who has run those committees at Pomona, I know well that there is an investigation process, and if there is a moment where we doubt something, we do put it through a verification process.
Okay.
I'll add on. Oh. Okay, I'll add on to that there's a good chance that the activities that you list, there's going to be evidence of them in other areas of the application as well. So your recommenders might be talking about them, and you might reference them in one of the writing areas as well. If an interview happens, you might talk about those activities with your interviewers. And so there are other places that we can find that evidence that you have been actively engaged in certain things. And so it's not just a matter of you telling us what you're involved in. It very often comes from multiple places.
And the only thing I will add to is that, you are speaking today to all admission officers who do manage India as one of their primary territories. And one of the pieces of having been involved in reading applications and working with students from the area for a number of years, that we have developed close relationships with counselors and some teachers as well. And so we do have that option as part of the application to reach out if there's additional questions. And that is something that we all do very regularly. And so as Adam said, and I think he summed it up so beautifully, in that, A, we actually do ask you to certify that your application is true and honest as part of the submission process. But you really have entered into this contract that is stating that you are approaching this process from a point of integrity. And we do have that opportunity, if we do have questions, to be able to verify if needed. The one piece I would add to just about sort of physical proof of activities. Of course, I talked about optional materials earlier as a great chance for you to really showcase some of the pieces of yourself that might not come through in other parts of the application. That said, if they're not things that we haven't explicitly asked for, it means that we don't really want them. And one of the reasons for that too is that more pieces of information within an application doesn't mean that we necessarily have more time to review it either. And so if, this goes on to, I know there's questions about extra recommendations and those kinds of things too, that if we don't explicitly ask for it in the application, sometimes that can just sort of muddy the waters of the review process and sort of add to our confusion rather than to add clarity to a file. And so really do sort of stick within the parameters of either what we require or what we've asked for in terms of optional pieces on the application.
Excellent, thank you. Let's move on to a different topic. This one got a few different questions, so I'm going to summarize it in two different ways. It's really about the number of recommendations that students should submit. So we had several questions about, would you ever accept more than 2 recommendations? And the 2 examples that I saw that I thought were worth talking about were school changes. So if you change schools between 10 and 11, from lower secondary to upper secondary, this student is considering asking for a 3rd teacher recommendation. Is that something we would be okay with? And the other one is for research and mentorship. And it might have been the same person who asked about the confirming extracurriculars, because it seems like it's a question about validating his or her time in the lab and just confirming that they really were learning at a high level in that lab during a summer research project. So I don't know if you want to take those examples or you want to maybe add your own, but what do you think about that?
I can get started on this one. And again, this could be an area where we all differ very slightly. So the RICE requirement is 2 teachers of recommendation and 1 counselor or other kind of school official. So we require 3, but you can have 4 on hand. My suggestion when you're considering the 4th or whatever that extra is at another school, what is being added in those letters of recommendation? What is that person telling us? Is this going to shed new light or light on new information in your record? Or is it going to be, repeating information that we might have already heard from the recommendations that we already have on hand? So as Kim mentioned, you do want to avoid muddying the waters when it comes to submitting too many materials. But if you do feel that an extra recommendation, whether it was from another school that you attended or an extracurricular, might shed more light on your application, then by all means, as long as the university permits that, then feel free to have that submitted.
And I absolutely agree with what Taryn just shared. The one thing I would add too, though, is that your counselor, your head teacher, whoever it may be that is writing that counselor recommendation, they can be a great person to lean on to add perhaps other pieces of context that might come through from an additional recommendation. And so rather than having another teacher submit a recommendation, or rather than having a supplemental one that comes from somebody who has served as an advisor in an extracurricular context, perhaps that is information you could ask your counselor or head teacher to include in their recommendation. And so that way it's still sort of working within the parameters of what we have asked for on our application, but it is able to add some of those additional pieces that might not have come through originally. And so that's just the one piece of advice I would add to that.
Yeah, I like those both. And at Pomona, I would say my general advice is you can generally go about 50% above a limit, but don't go 100, right? So if we ask for, 500 words. It's okay to go up to 600 or so, but don't go to 1,000 or something. Like if you need a little bit more space to communicate something of value, we're okay with that. We read in a way that is able to incorporate one extra letter, for example. But I do think that the point about adding value is important. And the other thing I would say is that logistically, you just have to submit the 2 through Common App. You may have to email the 3rd one. So my actual advice is not all offices make it easy to receive this kind of information. So make sure, to Taryn's point about staying organized, that if you do plan to do this, that you have the mechanism established by which to actually submit the letter, because nothing is worse than asking a teacher or a mentor to write something and then not being able to submit it because you can't figure out how to actually get it to them. We all want electronic documents these days. And so figuring out how to deliver it is actually takes a minute to figure out. All right. So that is the last question. We are now right on time. I want to turn it over to Arjun for a final word. We'll move to our final slide for some contact information. And we're so pleased that you could join us today.
Sorry, can I just ask one question?
We're right at time, but I think we probably need to close. But if you want to send it to us in the email, you certainly can. We're gonna put the email up there, but if you want to send us the email, please do. All right. And with that, we are going to go ahead and sign off. It has been fantastic meeting you all virtually. We hope to hear from you if you have any questions. And this session has been recorded, and Edbrand will certainly let you know how it can be made available. But we want to respect your time and respect ours as well. And so we're going to close the session. And we thank you so much for attending today's presentation.